Hello everyone, and welcome to part one of my series on the best movies of the last 20 years. I'll be going year by year and devoting 2 videos to each year in an effort to keep them short. 14 movies per year, one for each night of a 2-week period, in accordance with the standard, potentially completely made up average size of a film festival. Before I get started, I wanted to mention a few people who have subscribed to me very recently. Caddy B86, Effin Crimson, Effin Crimson? Maybe I spelled that wrong. Car Allen, King Frubby, I love that name, Andrej Skafar, and Skinslip. Thank you very much for subscribing to me. I need to visit your channels to find out what you guys are all about. And I haven't done that yet, I apologize, but I will do that very soon. So, like I said, going year by year, over the last 20 years. So I'm going to start with 1995, and I just want to make sure that I take a look here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah. I'm doing this by halfsies. Excuse me. Sorry, a little unprepared here. First, I'd like to talk about The Quick and the Dead. The Quick and the Dead is a Western that was directed by Sam Raimi. Came out in the early months of 1995. Got shot a while earlier, got delayed for a bit. I think they had some problems marketing it or whatever. Anyway, Sharon Stone is the main character. Sharon Stone, whom you know from Basic Instinct, Total Recall, Casino. She is the Clint Eastwood type character, a mysterious gunfighter who rides into the very corrupt small town of Redemption out in the middle of nowhere, where Gene Hackman lords over the place with his posse of riflemen and basically inflicts terror on everyone. A lot of really good character actors in this movie. Pat Hingle, who played Commissioner Gordon in the Schumacher and Tim Burton Batman movies, is the saloon keeper. And there's a lot of other people like Tobin Bell and Lance Henriksen and what have you. But the principal supporting characters are Russell Crowe as a former gunfighter turned preacher who has been dragged back into the fray by Gene Hackman because they used to be partners. And also Leonardo DiCaprio as a very young gunslinger, a very talented kid who is quite sure that Gene Hackman is his father, even though Gene Hackman denies it. This is a really fun movie. It's very stylish. I didn't like it that much when it first came out, but it's grown on me. And the score by Alan Silvestri is really wonderful. Silvestri did the score for The Avengers, but The Quick and the Dead is a great score. It has at least 4 really terrific themes in it. To Die For. To Die For is a movie that came out in the fall of '95. It was directed by Gus Van Sant and written by Greg Henry, and kind of takes on the form occasionally of mock doc, but not completely. There's a lot of dramatized scenes, and the whole sort of interview segments are really just more for color. The main character is played by Nicole Kidman. She's a young woman who got married to Matt Dillon, whose father, I think, is connected with the mob. Anyway, she's intent on becoming a television personality, being on the news, having her own talk show, something like that. You're not anyone, she says, unless you're on TV. And in an effort to gain notoriety, she might have possibly convinced a couple of teenagers from a local high school to assassinate her father so that she'll get attention on her. One of the kids is played by a young Joaquin Phoenix. One of his first roles as a young adult, he was actually in a movie called Space Camp in the 80s, but he was known as Leaf Phoenix then. Anyway, Joaquin Phoenix, one of his first early roles, and he's really good in it. And the movie itself is really funny. It's one of the only Nicole Kidman movies that I really like. I mean, she's been okay in a lot of movies, but sometimes I find her a bit brittle, and this type of character, she's very well suited to play this type of character. It's a really, really fun movie. The Cure. The Cure is a movie that's very, very obscure. Probably not a lot of places you can find it. It was directed by an actor named Peter Horton, who is on a television show called 30-something. The main characters are played by Brad Renfro, the late Brad Renfro, who was, a kid back then. He had been in The Client. He was the main character in the John Grisham film The Client, which had come out the previous year. Also, Joseph Mazzello, who was in Jurassic Park, and then went on to play one of the supporting characters in The Social Network. Joseph Mazzello is a kid who has cancer, and he, I'm sorry, he has AIDS. He got AIDS from a blood transfusion, and a lot of the neighborhood kids are not allowed to see him because of all the misconceptions about AIDS. But Brad Renfro is basically not a, he's sort of an outcast kid, so they become good friends. And they decide to do some research, and they find that there's some sort of shady, questionable doctor who claims he has a cure for AIDS, who's in Mississippi, so they decide to build a raft and actually sail down the Mississippi River rather than hitchhike in order to get the cure, and so Joseph Mazzel won't have AIDS anymore. It's a really, really good movie. Sad in some parts, but a good drama. Toy Story, of course, came out in 1995. It is the first feature film by Pixar, and the first fully computer-animated motion picture. Still a great movie, just fantastic. If you watch that and the Lego movie back-to-back, you'll notice the very, very last thing that happens in both those movies is extremely similar. Lego movie could do a lot worse than ripping off Toy Story. Yeah, it's also Joss Whedon had a hand in writing this, and I love Joss Whedon, of course. Terrific movie, and well worth your time if you have not seen it. Of course, also Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, not bad either, but that's later to come. Crimson Tide. Crimson Tide is a submarine thriller directed by Tony Scott, and had some dialogue rewrites by Quentin Tarantino, because Tony Scott had done True Romance 2 years earlier, which was also written by Mr. Tarantino. Gene Hackman, again, in this movie, and Denzel Washington. He's the commander of the submarine, the USS Alabama. Denzel Washington is his executive officer, and they begin to butt heads over their philosophy on how to handle the crew and how to conduct oneself in a high-pressure situation. Well, they get a message saying, guess what? The Russians are going to launch nuclear weapons at the U.S. So they're like, ooh, we better launch some missiles at them before they get their missiles off the ground. But then they get a second message pertaining to the missile launch, which is interrupted halfway through. Now Denzel says, well, we should confirm this message right here. They could be telling us not to launch. And Gene Hackman goes, no, we've got our orders already. We need to follow those orders until we get confirmation otherwise. And they sort of have this difference as to what they should do, and so Denzel doesn't want to launch the missiles, and Gene Hackman does, says it's their duty to do that, and so it's a good intense thriller. The score is by Hans Zimmer, who's done a lot of great scores over the years. Tony Scott's one of the better Tony Scott thrillers that he's made, and the supporting cast, as usual with Tony Scott and Jerry Bruckheimer movies, is just stuffed with awesome people. James Gandolfini is in it, Viggo Mortensen is in it, just tons and tons of great people. Safe. Safe is a movie that Todd Haynes directed. Todd Haynes did Far From Heaven with Julianne Moore. And Julianne Moore also starred in this movie Safe, which is about a woman who is a Los Angeles wife and mother who begins to have adverse physical reactions to the environment around her. Modern day chemicals, apparently. It's this new sort of fangled thing that people are going on about, modern day sickness, where you have a bad reaction to things around you, household chemicals and what have you. But it's implied that it's her life that's actually making her sick, because it just seems so empty and purposeless, right, exactly. It's a really, really good movie. Very, very quiet, and sort of like everything is just sort of simmering on a low boil for the whole thing. Probably not everyone's cup of tea, but it's a really good film, and I would suggest it. And finally, I'd like to mention The Usual Suspects, which of course is Bryan Singer's big breakthrough directorial film. The script was written by Christopher McQuarrie, who of course went on to become a director himself with The Way of the Gun, and he's directing the new Mission Impossible film. The Usual Suspects, of course, is this twisty crime thriller with an incredible ensemble cast. Kevin Spacey won an Oscar for this movie, Gabriel Byrne, Pete Postlethwaite, Benicio del Toro, Stephen Baldwin, Kevin Pollak, Chaz Palminteri, of course. Chaz Palminteri is kind of the weak link in the cast for me. I didn't think that he was all that great, but everyone else is really terrific. Oh, and Dan Hedaya. Dan Hedaya is really fun as well. And I'm sure a lot of you already know about Kaiser Soze and some of the twists in the movie, but if you don't let anyone tell you what it's about. Just go and watch the thing. It's amazing. So those are the first 7 for 1995. My next video will have another 7 for 1995, and then we'll move on to 1996 later. Thank you very much for watching. Take it easy.